How you finance a Fringe show. That's how you finance a Fringe show.
Exactly, yeah, and nearly falling over there. But here we are. Well, thank you for inviting me, Brendan.
Thanks for having me.
Nice to meet you. I've been following you on Instagram and following your journey, so it's really nice to be here and finally see the show. And what a joyous show it was.
Yeah, what was it like? You were in the audience. We had 4 people from Dusk, the musical, play it for the first time. We'd never met before. What was it like being out there?
It was joyful. It was really. You pulled me in. I came in a minute late.
Okay.
So I didn't have any like pre-understanding of what's going on or why these guys had come up on the stage.
Right.
But I sat down and instantly I was drawn into something. But before we get into it, I do have a little tradition with the podcast that I mustn't forget to do. What we do is we do a 3, 2, 1 and we clap.
Okay.
And then that's the beginning of the podcast.
Great.
You ready for it?
That's how you sync your audio?
That is exactly how I sync the audio.
Yes. That's how I do it as well.
But it's turned into a thing that people are like, I want to do that.
Great.
And so, yeah. So
Do we look at the
we
camera?
can look at the camera, we can look at each other.
Right.
We just got to do the clap because it's the audio that matters.
Excellent. All
So
right.
here we go. 3, 2, 1. Sweet. And we're in.
All right.
So, yeah, I felt, I had joy. I sat there with a smile on my face. It was a very unique and different experience being drawn into this virtual world. But there was something about you leading that as well. Whilst part of your face was covered with the VR headset, you had a wide smile. And that was really enticing. And it was really, immediately I kind of felt safe and at ease in this strange new world. Mm-hmm. How did you get there? How did you get to that point to create a world like this?
It's been very slow and kind of truly rock by rock or bit by bit, in that we started during the pandemic, just trying to connect in some sort of shared space. And that led us to, we use web-based virtual reality. So it's literally a website that is 3D. So it's the same way you think of like Wix or Squarespace has like templates.
Yeah.
We build a template, which is a world, that can then be spun up by anybody in unlimited iterations.
So you could put this in this place here and it could be running in a theatre down the road or the other side of the world.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or you could have 100 instances at the same time. So you could run different.
I feel like something new is happening here. I feel like we're at the beginning of a new space and time that technology and the arts are combining, and this is the beginning of that.
Well, I think what's exciting, I think technology and the arts have always been hands in hand. If you think about shamanism, thousands of years ago, right? Text was a technology. Fire that we gather around the campfire, right, to tell stories. That was the technology. We have always used technology for artistry, creativity, storytelling. And it's just how that technology has lended itself. And for me, all this technology falls under the category of XR. So virtual reality, augmented reality is all part of XR, which is extended reality. And what I like about that is the VR isn't the thing. It isn't the showcase. It is extending the reality that's already there. So it starts with the performers on stage, the live music, the live audience, and then we are just extending the scenery, the story, the characters.
You're taking it to a new level and making you're immersed into that world.
Right.
And it isn't just the virtual reality or the technical stuff. Like I said, it was you as well. You were leading that.
Well, and us, because this audience especially was extremely interactive and playful with the onstage participants, giving them suggestions, telling them where to look, really responding to the danger that was around us, and wanting to take care of both my character fictionally, but also us performing on stage.
How does it feel to finally, you said it was like a long journey to get here. It was, the technical stuff can be a bit tedious to get through.
Oh, this,
and like
here
I said,
at Fringe, it's broken several times.
Yeah, and I've seen some of the stuff you share on your Instagram. You're quite honest with the glitches you have.
Sometimes too honest, yeah.
Yeah, you show the process, which I think is really important to show the process, because I think that helps and inspires others. Because sometimes I came here tonight and saw a finished, polished show. But it isn't always like that, is it?
Because I glitched out in the middle of the Heart song.
Right.
So I literally, my headset broke in the middle of the Heart song.
Well, the audience perspective.
And I sat there, during the saxophone solo, I logged back in.
You just walked
and got
through
back
it.
into the.
But from me sitting in the audience, I didn't know that there was anything wrong. I didn't have that moment of what a shame that I'm back in reality now.
Of course.
I still was in the show. I was still in the moment. Nothing broke. Nothing broke for me. And I think it's important that you do continue to go with it.
Yeah.
When you're doing a show, when you're doing something like this.
Yeah.
that if the technical stuff does stop, then you must lead it forward.
Well, I think it never goes wrong, it just goes fun. Right? And that's the key. As long as we're still engaging in play, because at the end of the day, it is a game.
Yes.
And in theater, it's called a play for a reason. As long as we're holding that space for revelry with each other, I think it doesn't really matter what we're doing on stage.
And what a great way to bring the audience into that play as well is actually give them the headsets.
Yes.
That you pick 4 members of the audience to play with you.
Yeah.
And I've seen audience participation in other shows where it can be quite daunting for them to join in on that. They've got to think on the spot.
Sure.
And that can be quite hard to do when you're immersed in a show. And so the other day, someone asked me to press a red button, and I was like, "What the fuck's a red button? Like, what do I do? What do I do?" And I just couldn't think. Whereas with this, they're playing from the start. They're playing a game with you,
Right.
And so they don't have to think differently. They're already you're bringing people into a new world. Was there any kind of like idea from your past of you playing computer games that kind of is happening now?
I would say it's actually yes, but not in the way that seems obvious. I'm a terrible gamer. I'm very bad at video games.
Right.
But I love watching people play them. And so that idea that a game is communal, even if you're not the one playing it, and that interactivity is actually an invitation for different types of interaction styles. Some people are very interactive. They want to grab the controller. They know all the cheat codes, right? They're racing ahead. And other people are, interactivity is actually passive. It's just an invitation.
You're taking me back to when I was younger, and my friends would be playing the SNES.
Yes.
That was from my generation. Was the SNES? It was like the big thing. But yeah, I was crap at computer games as well. I couldn't quite do it. I could do the first 2 or 3 levels,
right? And
then that was kind of it got a bit too much for me after that. But I still enjoyed sitting on my friend's bed or sofa or whatever around their house. They were playing it, and I was still there with my mates, engaged in the game.
Yeah.
And so from having that experience, that's what's kind of led you all the way to this. That you knew there was a pull into this.
I believe so, and I also think, in any technology, right, because there's so much money and there's so many investors and venture capital, everyone's looking for the killer app, right? They're looking for the thing that's going to make this technology explode. I think it's connection. I think what is so great about virtual reality specifically is that from anywhere in the world, we can literally share space together. And these multi-user social environments, that connection, I think, is the magic of immersion. And so I think that, and that's the same experience that we have when we're playing a video game together or any game together.
And that's really interesting because I see that with what they're doing with some of the big tech companies, like Meta, for example, they're kind of struggling to take off. They're kind of struggling to find that space. And maybe it's because they're looking too insular. Maybe you've discovered something here with bringing the theatre world in, with bringing the real world into the virtual reality world rather than just a meta space.
Sure. No, I think we always want to have a foothold in our own reality.
Yeah, and it's a unique thing and an exciting time. Like I think this is a moment that you'll look back on, and this is like a moment of history. Can we be big enough to say that? I mean, this is unique, isn't it? Do you know of anything else out there that's like this?
So there's a small community of people who are putting theater, music, art inside of virtual reality experiences, and I'm a part of it. Actually, after this, I will go to the Venice Film Festival and debut a new work that is only virtual. So I'll be at the hotel playing 9 characters, and the audience will put on a headset at Venice Film Festival. We will never meet. It's an hour-long experience. So there's a bunch of those, but I'm unaware in the Western world of experiences where there's the shared interaction of theatricality using this technology. There's some really great work in Asia of using like holograms, where you can see the physical performer, and then there's like netting, and they're projecting the virtual character and the virtual avatar. But I think that this is the real intersection that excites me, is having these dual audiences, rather than it being entirely inside.
I've heard of some people that's kind of quite fearful of embracing this technology and doing something like this. That does it take away from theatre?
Sure.
Does it take away from the art form by adding in this technology, or is it adding something new?
Well,
I think there's always with new things fear.
Yes.
Because we don't quite know yet.
I mean, we're not coming for theater, right? Like, this isn't replacing theater. We've been doing that for thousands of years. We're not going to stop. But I think it's really interesting when you look at the history of theater specifically and commercialized theater. For a long time, it was frowned upon to use microphones. Now every show on the West End of Broadway has microphones, is using filters, is using correction, is using reverb, right? There's digital instrumentation now. There's electric lighting, and we almost expect electric lighting at this point on every single show. We brought in our own because it's expected. So in some ways, early on, I think that there is a hesitation to invite technology. But again, technology has always been part of this tradition. It's just a matter of how we choose to adopt it. And again, I think it's all about intentionality. If it's about the tech and if it's about the VR, I don't think that's very exciting. That's a tech.
No, and the audience won't engage with that. And where's the story? That here there was a story. There was it reminded me of the books, the Create Your Own Adventures story.
Exactly.
This is the next level.
Yes.
It's a few more levels up actually, but it reminded me of that the books that I used to enjoy as a child, where I'd read a page and it would go, "Would you like to do this? Would you like to do that?" And you brought that element into it as well. So why not just do a straightforward story then? Why not just do you performing this and show what's going on?
You mean not with the virtual reality?
Yeah, with the virtual reality, but you gave the audience the option to scan a QR code, and they could say what stage happens next. That can be can it be dangerous for you as a performer? Because you don't really know where that's going to go.
At one point, I let them text into the world.
Yes.
We've had people text all sorts of things because I'm giving the audience that ability to chat, essentially. But I think that theater is, at the end of the day, a social contract that we are going to practice empathy with each other, both at a meta level that we're going to like sit in our seat respectfully and we're not going to like run up and punch the performer. But there is then that with the characters wanting to really invest in their catharsis and their story and their emotional journey. And in a lot of ways, it would be disingenuous to have an interactive story where some audience gets to really immerse themselves in that and not give an invitation to others. Now, there are theater goers that are never going to pick up the phone app. They're never going to want to be in headset. They just want to sit in the dark, hear the music, and then look at the spectacle of the puppetry brought to life. Because at the end of the day, it's just puppets.
Yes.
And we've seen puppets for thousands of years as well. So to me, this is scaffolding on top of really everything we love about the theater, not looking to change or pivot or replace it.
And I guess that's just a natural place to go, is that place of fear, that place of, you know, but there is so much more to be discovered from progression, you know, and isn't that what all creativity is about?
And isn't that what this festival is about? Like, this festival is specifically for experimenting with new, sometimes unfinished or underdeveloped original work for live arts. And to me, that's why to bring work to the Fringe.
Yes, and I guess that's why you're here.
Yes.
I guess that, you know, I don't think this is, whilst I saw a polished and fun and enjoyable show, I don't think this is the full thing. I think this has got room to grow. And I guess a lot of that potentially comes down to money. Because I can imagine that what you've done here costs a lot. Yeah. You know, how many projectors have you got around this room?
Well, so we got lucky. So this space, we applied to Fringe, and then we asked about Wi-Fi. We should have done it in the other order. And so then we went, we can't use any of the traditional kind of the known Fringe venues. We have to find another venue. And Karen, our company manager, who's over there, it was a reason we're at Fringe. She called Fringe Central and said, "Can you give us a list of venues that have robust Wi-Fi?" And so this venue had done like a show 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and in their tech specs had listed the Wi-Fi. We didn't know about the projectors. So when
So these were already set up here?
Yeah, these are set up here, and they use them for like Google Slides and like looping clouds.
But
they don't use them for movies.
This just works out perfectly for you.
Yeah, so we've never put the audience inside the virtual world before like this.
Wow.
We've always just projected onto a back wall. So suddenly we had the ability to literally surround the audience with the entire virtual world, which we've never done, which then required a lot more work.
I'm finding this more and more when people put themselves out there into the world and they work on these things and they put the stuff together, other pieces start to come into place for you. like this, like finding this place and it having the perfect setup for you,
Absolutely.
has just naturally taken you to the next level.
Well, in a lot of ways, you know, immersive work, virtual reality work, it follows the methodology of devised theater, which in a lot of ways, devised theater is when the elements of the production actually help inform and workshop the story because there's limitations. Like if there's a big column in the center of the room, you now have to make that part of the storytelling.
Of course, yeah.
And so in a lot of ways, again, like part of what is actually furthering the piece is standing it up and embracing the limitations or the challenges or the invitation to do something like wrap the audience, the world around the audience.
And tell me a little bit about this being a musical as well. Why choose a musical for this type of theatre?
So I think that in the long history of musicals, at the end of the day, a musical is about, we reach a point in the internal life of the character that is larger than words, and so they break into song. That is the conceit that we have all loved. It's an American art form, actually. It's the one thing we can claim. But so in a lot of ways, with a video game, we have the idea of cutscenes, right? There's these very slick, polished, elevated moments that when you reach certain checkpoints in the story, that you're free to do whatever. You're fighting a battle. You're trying to figure out the controls. When you reach these milestones, it unlocks this little piece of performance, and that's been game culture for decades. And so it felt like it just fit perfectly that if we were going to tell a video game adjacent story, that at each checkpoint of the main character's journey, we would have a cutscene, have an elevated moment that in theater language would be a musical. And
was there something, a personal thing for you to make this a musical? So you're an actor, a performer, but are you particularly in musical theatre?
I really wanted to be a musical theater. A lot of my peers are on Broadway, and I always was not the type of person who was going to make a career of Broadway. I moved to Los Angeles and work a lot in film, television, and video games, and in Los Angeles, I can sing. In New York, they're like, he'll do, but you have Broadway people. And so I've always loved singing, and I love performance, and I've never written a musical before. But it has always been a passion of mine. And so getting to develop this and write this and kind of embrace, like, okay, well, if I was going to write a musical, what would it sound like? What homages would I take? What inspiration would I pull from? And so it's been kind of this surprising thing I would have never, ever imagined in my entire life.
I wonder if that says something about the judgment of others that we put on ourselves as well.
Oh, 100%.
That if you'd have stayed with that kind of New York Broadway scene and been told you're not quite good enough for this, if this would ever exist.
It wouldn't. I auditioned, my very first audition for a musical theater tour that will remain nameless. I was in the audition and I watched the casting director in Sharpie write on the top of my resume, not a singer. I was like, okay. And so but every performer has these stories, right? Every performer is that that one audition was going to be their last, or they moved back home for 2 months and then a film came to town and they booked that role that changed everything. And so I think that is the journey of being a performer, is that it's not about whether your talent is there or whether your passion is there or whether you deserve to be in the industry. It's really people. It's have you found your people? Have you found your community? Have you found the story that you're meant to tell?
And I guess, have you found yourself?
Sure.
You found the space where it works for you.
Yeah.
You found the space where you can do your thing and create this vision, and it is a vision, and I can see this moving forward. Where do you see it moving? Where do you see this going?
I think we are accomplishing kind of what was the biggest milestone for me, which is that we'd never sat down for more than one night and performed it as a proper run of a show. So this is technically our world premiere, because we've only performed at conferences to really demonstrate the technology, not to perform. And so
why would you do that? Why would you do that first?
Because you could get funding pockets to develop.
And you need the money
and you can fly around, and you can also start interacting and interfacing. So I met Karen. I keep pointing to Karen, who's not on camera, but I met Karen because I was at one of these events and presented the work, and she watched the live stream of that, and we talked for 2 years, and now we're here. And so you never know what conversation that's going to start or who you're going to meet. We've had people from Meta come to the show here at Fringe and talk to us after and go, I didn't know you could do this with our product. And so you just don't ever know where it's going to go. You kind of have to jump and the net will appear.
Yeah. And I guess you're perhaps lighting a fire for others to be inspired by this as well.
So.
Because I think that's the thing with creativity. It isn't necessarily just about you and what you're doing.
Right.
It's also about starting something for someone else.
Sure.
Or for the community as a whole.
Well, 1 in 5 teenagers own or frequently have played virtual reality games. I have to believe there's some theater kids in there. And an incredible amount of the younger population right now, like young kids, are building worlds in Roblox. So this next generation is already, their relationship with creativity, and especially digital creativity, is unlike anything I grew up with, because those tools weren't there. And so obviously they're going to want to tell stories with these tools, and letting that be okay and letting that be acceptable. Like, to me, this is a beacon to say, I want to meet you, I want to know you, I want to hear your story.
So how do you get more and more people in? You had a good audience in here today. How do you continue to spread this message then from here?
I mean, you hope that events like this are part of that springboard, right? Is that you come to a highly saturated event like this where there are presenters and programmers, and you find a champion for the piece, or you find the next production of the piece, or you find a grant to workshop a different piece. Maybe non-player character isn't the full realization of what it is we're doing here, and it's that next thing, or the third thing, or the fourth thing. So for me, it's really just, we need iteration. We need to feel in the room night after night, like, what's working, what isn't, what's interesting, what do we want to keep exploring, what song is missing from the musical that we need to write. We had a song
you just keep building upon building upon each. Once one thing works, there's another thing you can work on over here.
Of course.
You're kind of sculpting something, aren't you? In fact, with my earlier podcast, a comedian was telling me about how she's continuously molding this show, continuously. It's like a sculpture to her.
Sure.
And she's pulling apart one bit and pulling apart another bit, and she doesn't fully know what it's going to look like in the end, but she's always working on it.
Yeah. Well, and with us, I mean, the set just keeps growing, because you just keep building new worlds and new scenery and new characters.
And I guess the limitations of your imagination know no bounds in this world.
No. It's whatever you can devise, essentially. We have another musical piece that we've started to dabble with that uses artificial intelligence, so that the audience is actually generating the world that we're in. And as that technology becomes faster, that co-creation between audience and performer, I think is really compelling to see, if used ethically and responsibly, of how you're sourcing that art and those models. You could let a new world, I saw the Impromptunes, which is a improvised musical group from Australia. They played us last night, and we saw their show. And can you imagine if they get that prompt and suddenly they've got that first set, and then they've got the next set, they've got avatars for everybody, and they're generating the story in real time.
So what advice have you got to anyone that's got an idea like this, something that's really unique, but kind of it could work out in the world? How would you tell someone to get started and to move forward with that unique and different idea? You
just start. You start doing it. You do the very bad version of it, and then you do another very bad version of it, and then you just keep doing all the crappy versions of it until, by process of elimination, you are finding the better version. And also, I find, and this could just be I've done so much, like, low-budget film, low-budget movies, low-budget theater through the years, is when there isn't funding, right? When it is just pure drive and creativity and artistry, you attract people who are there for the right reasons.
100%.
And then you meet fellow artists, and the key then, I think, is to empower them to have autonomy on their department. So, like, Maurice and I write the music together, but I really trust him as an engineer to develop out some of the soundscape of this world, because I want this to be his art as well. This isn't just mine. This is ours. And that's true with the audience every night as well. Is they laid down on the floor to today's show. They are not supposed to do that at all. But I went and joined them. And because this is theirs. This show is theirs. It's my gift to them. And so whatever they want to do with that gift, I should embrace it and accept it. So if you're creating something, you just start and you just create Every single world that is here tonight and every avatar that is here tonight, I started in Blender, which is a free piece of software, and made the atrocious first version of that. Thank goodness no one has ever seen. But it allowed me to kind of like dolls stage, like, oh, I think we'd want to go over here, and what would happen if they went over there, and kind of really on my own, nights and weekends, build out the crap version.
However, you say that it was good for you to start not being seen, but I think there's also something about being seen as well, about failing out in open.
Sure.
That's something that I've really learned to embrace, that when I started doing this, if you go back to the very beginning, it was terrible. But doing this every day it's only been a year for me of doing this, but doing it every day over a year, it's slowly getting better. And it's something about doing it and then putting it out into the world and then doing it again and putting it out into the world and just keep moving forward. Yeah. Just keep failing. Yeah. It's really hard, isn't it, to fail at first? But it's also very rewarding once you start to see the things come together.
Well, and I actually like that analogy a lot of, if you think about it athletically, you know, like how many times does an athlete just eat it, just like fall down and injure themselves, you know, or hit the ball the wrong way? And it's only when it's no longer a terrible failure or a bad day that something went wrong, right? That you can start embracing like, oh, there's gonna be some good shows, there's gonna be some bad shows, some good ideas, some bad ideas. Failure doesn't stick to you as much if there's more of it. In some ways, it's like 1,000 bee stings instead of one big punch.
I think with creativity, the difference is from I think the athlete analogy is a really good one, but the difference with creativity is it's not necessarily about you. It's about the art, the thing that you're creating.
Right.
And I think finding that within myself gave me a lot of freedom. It took me out of my ego. It made me go, this podcast isn't me.
Right.
This is the art, the conversations that I'm building, and that's the thing that I'm going to work on.
Right.
And so I can take my ego out of it, and I can be like, I can be free in that sense. I don't need to worry about failing because my ego is not going to get damaged through that.
And you mentioned a conversation. So art is a dialogue. Right. First, it's a dialogue between the artist and their technical ability, whether that's playing an instrument or painting. Like it is that dialogue of the biology of trying to figure out how to express something that's inside you and manifest it externally. And then it becomes a dialogue with the audience. And I think in all of these things, whether it's podcasting or whether it's the show we did tonight, it's the feedback loop shortening with the immediacy of how quickly you can create, and therefore that dialogue is much faster than it used to be if you had to record to tape and then edit tape.
Yes,
And similarly, that dialogue between the audience is so short because you can upload this tonight and immediately be engaging in dialogue with your audience. Yeah. And to me, I'm excited to see how short can we make that feedback loop that we're actually...
From the moment of an idea being born to the creation of it, to the birth of it, how quick can that happen? And you're right, I wouldn't be doing this now if the technology wasn't where it is. If technology from even 10 years ago, this just wouldn't be possible because the amount of time it would take to just process that data. If I want to, I can process this tonight and it be straight out there in the world. And then move on to the next thing and the next idea and the next idea. And more ideas can be born and more fires can be ignited and more creativity can happen. And I guess that can only be a good thing, right?
I think so. I think it all depends on, you mentioned this at the very beginning, demonstrating process, sharing your process and being willing to fail openly. I think the fears, you mentioned the fears around VR, there's the fears around like artificial intelligence. And I think ultimately the humanness is the process, is the failing, is the risk. And I think that what AI can't do is show its work. And so if you want to be future-proof, in some ways what humanity really is process-driven, not product-driven.
And that's really interesting as well. So I went on a tour of Edinburgh this morning, and
I haven't left the building, so you got to give me the information on that.
No, it was. I don't normally do things like that, but I thought, no, do you know what? It's my first time in Edinburgh. I'm going to go around and discover the city, and I'm not going to lie and pretend and say I know the Latin quote, but there was a Latin quote, and it said, I'm going to have to find out what the Latin is, but it said, the future is the past. And that is showing your work. We can do that. We can look at what's come before to build what comes next.
Absolutely.
And I think you're doing that here.
I hope so.
Well, what a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, thank you for the conversation.
No, thank you so much for joining me. If anyone wants to find out more about you and about your show,
Sure.
How do they do that?
I'm Brendan A. Bradley, all of the places on all the social media, unless you want to be mean, and then I'm not on social media. And then we use the hashtag #MPCMusical to promote the show. And the venue we're in tonight is Yotel, so you can find them at Yotel.
I guess when someone does something that helps and supports you, even in the unexpected ways, we should share the appreciation,
100%.
shouldn't we?
Yeah. It's the only way it keeps going.
Yeah, exactly. And I always like to end these with, I appreciate if anyone has been watching or listening to this conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again, Brendan. Nice to meet you.